The bell above the glass door jingled softly as the morning sun spilled across the polished tile floor of Harper's Diner. The smell of bacon and coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the chatter of farmers discussing crop yields and truck drivers swapping road stories. It was the kind of Tuesday morning in Fairfield, population 4,102, where everyone thought they knew everyone, but peace shattered in an instant. Get out. You don't belong here. The words cracked like a whip. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Forks hovered in the air. A heavy fist crashed into the face of Elias Johnson, a 71-year-old retired Army medic. His frail body staggered back, colliding with a counterstool. A steaming cup of coffee slipped from his hand, splattering across the floor. Coins from his pocket clinked and scattered like tiny explosions. "Know your place, old man," sneered Cole Matthews. A broad-shouldered man with gold rings on his fingers and arrogance dripping from his voice. He loomed over Elias like a predator over wounded prey. The diner went dead silent. Phones came out. Screens glowed. Recordings began. In seconds, what looked like an ordinary scuffle transformed into a viral moment waiting to happen. A swaggering bully humiliating a frail black veteran. Elias lifted a trembling hand to his cheek. Heat radiated from the fresh bruise. His cardigan sagged around his shoulders, worn and faded, making him look smaller, weaker, like an easy target. Cole smirked, certain he had the upper hand. "Thought you could sit here? With us?" "Not today, Grandpa." But the arrogance blinded him. What Cole didn't know, what no one in that diner could have guessed, was that hidden beneath Elias's cardigan, tucked close to his heart, rested a medal that told a different story. A silver star, earned on a battlefield halfway across the world, where men twice Cole's size had crumbled under fire, and in Elias's phone. Saved under a single word. Daniel was a direct line to his only son, the newly appointed Deputy Director of Homeland Security. At a booth near the counter, Mariana Cruz, the waitress, gripped her notepad so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her eyes darted between the veteran and his attacker. She knew Elias. She knew his story. And she knew Cole had just made the biggest mistake of his life. "That idiot has no clue," she whispered under her breath. But her words were drowned out by the buzzing of Instagram Live notifications. Elias straightened slowly. His hands didn't shake, not because he wasn't hurt, but because training drilled into his bones decades ago never left him. Breathing steady, eyes calm, he pulled his phone from his pocket. The crowd leaned forward, whispering. Cole laughed, mistaking the silence for surrender. "What now? Calling the cops?" "Go ahead. They won't do a thing. Everyone here knows who runs this town." But Elias wasn't calling the police. As his thumb hovered over the familiar number. A dozen cameras zoomed closer, capturing every breath. Every flicker of light from the tiny American flag pin glinting on his chest. What had started as a moment of humiliation was about to shift, because Cole Matthews hadn't just slapped an elderly man in a diner. He had struck the father of one of the most powerful men in the country. And retribution, swift, undeniable, and very public, was now only one phone call away. The diner was still frozen in silence, but the air had changed. Where moments ago Cole Matthews stood triumphant, grinning like a king among peasants, now there was a tension thick enough to choke on. Every eye in the room fixed on Elias Johnson, the frail veteran who refused to bow. Cole spat on the floor, pacing like a restless wolf. "You gonna cry, old man? Call your grandkids to come save you?" His laughter echoed harshly against the chrome and glass, but Elias didn't answer. His thumb pressed dial, and the phone lifted to his ear. His back straightened just a little, his chest raising with the kind of quiet dignity that no slap could erase. A low, commanding voice answered on the second ring. "Dad?" A hush swept through the diner. It wasn't just what was said, but how it was said. Calm, respectful, protective. The kind of voice that carried authority even over a phone line. Elias's lips barely moved. "Daniel!" Cole barked out a laugh, turning toward the crowd filming him. "What's he gonna do? Read me a bedtime story?" The audience didn't laugh with him. Some lowered their phones slightly, suddenly aware they were capturing something far bigger than a street-side altercation. Elias's eyes didn't leave his attacker. His tone steady, deliberate. There's been an incident. On the other end, silence brief but heavy. Then, where are you? Harper's Diner, Fairfield. Cole leaned in mockingly, trying to snatch the phone. Tell him you tripped. Tell him you slipped on the coffee. His words dripped arrogance, but his swagger faltered when Elias didn't even blink. Daniel's voice sharpened, steel beneath velvet. Stay where you are. Don't move. I'll handle it. The line went dead. Elias lowered the phone. He didn't need to explain further. The machinery of justice had already started turning. Cole shoved him hard against the counter. Who was that, huh? Your retirement home nurse? Think you scare me? His voice cracked slightly this time, betraying a sliver of doubt. Mariana Cruz, the waitress, stepped forward, trembling but firm. Cole, stop. You don't know what you're doing. He snapped his glare toward her. Shut up, Mari. This doesn't concern you. But she didn't shrink back. She looked at Elias at the bruise forming on his cheek, the calm in his eyes, and felt something shift. That man saved lives while you were still learning to walk. You don't get to treat him like this. Murmurs rose. A truck driver in the corner muttered, Ain't right, hitting an old vet. Another voice added, Maybe we should call the sheriff. Cole's face flushed red. His control was slipping. Y'all think you're brave? You think filming me makes you heroes? I run this town. But even as he roared, headlights swept across the diner windows. Not the gentle beams of passing cars, these were sharp, synchronized, and purposeful. Engines idled outside, heavy, official. Every head turned. Forks clattered. Phones rose higher. Cole's bravado flickered. What the hell? Elias stood tall, a quiet shadow against the neon glow. For the first time, he spoke directly to his attacker, his voice calm but cutting. You just made a mistake, son. One you won't walk away from. The diner door opened. The jingle of the bell seemed absurdly small compared to the men and women who stepped inside. Black suits, earpieces, eyes scanning the room with military precision. At their center, pushing past stunned onlookers, was Daniel Johnson, broad-shouldered, presence commanding, every inch the high-ranking federal officer he had become. His gaze landed on Elias first, softening for only a heartbeat. Then it shifted to Cole, and hardened like steel. The bully who thought he ran the town suddenly looked very small, because the man he had slapped wasn't just a frail old nobody. He was the father of the Deputy Director of Homeland Security. And now, the whole diner and soon, the entire internet was about to see what that meant. The diner's neon sign buzzed, faintly above the glass as silence swallowed the room. Every breath, every heartbeat seemed louder than the hum of the refrigerators. All eyes fixed on the man who had just walked in, Daniel Johnson. He wasn't dressed like a sheriff or a small-town cop. His black tailored suit, polished shoes, and the subtle glint of the badge clipped at his belt told a different story. A man of national authority. A man accustomed to command. For a brief second, his eyes softened as they found Elias. Dad. Just one word. Low, respectful. Elias gave a single nod. No dramatics. No tears. Just mutual recognition between father and son. Then Daniel's gaze cut across the room and landed on Cole Matthews. The temperature seemed to drop. Cole, standing near the counter with his fists still curled, suddenly looked younger, smaller, less certain. He forced a laugh, the sound brittle. Who the hell are you supposed to be? His lawyer. Daniel stepped forward, slow, measured. The agents flanking him fanned out, scanning every corner of the diner with silent efficiency. The entire building seemed to shrink under their presence. I'm the man you should have prayed never to meet, Daniel said, his voice steady as a drawn blade. Cole's grin faltered, but pride clung to him like a drowning man to driftwood. You think I'm scared of a suit? I don't care who you are. This old man disrespected me, and I slam. Daniel's palm hit the counter so hard the salt shakers rattled. The entire diner jumped. His eyes didn't blink, didn't waver. You assaulted a decorated war veteran. My father. And you did it in front of half this town with cameras rolling. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones tilted, recording every second. Cole's bravado melted into a sneer, but the sweat glistening on his temple betrayed him. You don't get it, Cole spat. This is my town. My family's got money, connections. Daniel cut him off with a laugh. Not mocking, cold, dangerous. Son, your connections don't stretch as far as mine. Not by a mile. He pulled a small folder from his coat pocket and tossed it onto the counter. Papers slid out, photographs, records, bank slips. I already know who you are. Cole Matthews. Local thug, record sealed by Daddy's donations. 3 counts of aggravated assault buried. 2 DUI charges vanished. And now this. Gasps spread. Cole's eyes darted, panic flashing. Bet that's private. Daniel leaned closer, his voice a whisper that still carried across the room. Not anymore. The agents moved in closer, forming a wall behind him. Elias finally spoke, his tone calm but laced with quiet authority. Daniel. His son looked at him. For the first time, Daniel's hard expression softened. Elias didn't want vengeance, he wanted justice. That subtle difference carried the weight of a lifetime of service. Daniel gave a small nod. Then, turning back to Cole, he delivered the words like a gavel striking wood. Cole Matthews. You're under federal investigation effective immediately. The diner erupted in noise whispers. Gasps, the sound of chairs scraping as people leaned forward. Cole tried one last time. Voice cracking. You can't do this. I didn't do anything wrong. Mariana Cruz, the waitress, stepped forward, holding up her phone. The video she'd captured played loud enough for all to hear Cole's insults, the slap, the mockery. No room for denial. Daniel's agents moved in, securing Cole's arms. He thrashed wildly, shouting curses, but his words carried no weight anymore. The image of power he once clung to was gone, shredded under the gaze of a man who truly held authority. As Cole was dragged toward the door, Daniel turned back to his father. For a moment, the world outside, the flashing lights, the crowd gathering faded away. You okay, Dad? Elias's hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his coat. Been through worse, he said with a faint smile. But I knew you'd come. Daniel placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Always. And with that, the Johnsons stood together, one scarred by the past, the other armored by the present, while the world outside prepared to witness the downfall of a man who thought he was untouchable. The cameras kept rolling. The story was no longer just about a slap in a diner. It was about power, justice, and the day arrogance met its reckoning. Outside Murphy's diner, the night air felt electric. Red and blue lights washed across the parking lot as squad cars lined the street. Reporters from the local paper, who had shown up expecting to cover crop prices at the county fair, now found themselves broadcasting the biggest scandal in Millbrook's history. Inside, the smell of burnt bacon and spilled coffee still hung heavy. But the true weight in the room wasn't food, it was truth. Every customer had their phone out, uploading, live streaming, spreading the clip of Cole Matthews striking Elias Johnson across the internet at lightning speed. The video went viral before Cole even made it to the squad car. Breaking. Local businessman assaults elderly. Black veteran, one headline screamed. Wait until you see who his son is. Another post teased. By the time Cole's head was ducked under the squad car door, hashtags were trending nationwide. Hashtag justice for Elias. Hashtag Cole Matthews. Hashtag heroes wear cardigans. Cole sat cuffed in the back seat, his swagger completely gone. His eyes darted between the gathering crowd and Daniel's expressionless face. He slammed his shoulder against the window. This is harassment. My father's gonna bury you all in lawsuits. Daniel didn't flinch. He leaned closer to the glass, speaking just loud enough for Cole to hear. Your father can't buy you out of this one. Not with the evidence, not with the whole world watching. The words hit Cole harder than the cuffs biting into his wrists. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. Back inside, Elias tried to steady his breathing. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. Mariana, still clutching her phone, approached him carefully. "Mr. Johnson, people are calling you a hero online. Your name is everywhere." Elias gave a tired smile, shaking his head. "I'm no hero. Just a man trying to drink his coffee in peace." But Daniel placed a firm hand on his father's shoulder. "You are a hero, Dad, and it's time this town remembered it." Within the hour, the diner was swarming with uniformed local cops, federal agents, even a pair of men in suits whose presence made everyone uneasy. They flashed IDs too quickly to read, then began speaking quietly with Daniel in the corner. Mariana whispered to a customer, "That's not local jurisdiction anymore. This is bigger. Way bigger." She was right. Cole's arrest wasn't just about one man's cruelty. Federal files connected the Matthews family to decades of shady dealings, construction contracts awarded without bids, town council votes bought with donations, harassment charges that mysteriously disappeared. The Matthews name had ruled Millbrook for 3 generations, but now it was all unraveling. Reporters cornered Fire Chief Rodriguez outside the diner. His voice trembled as he spoke into the cameras. "I saw it with my own eyes." Elias Johnson didn't provoke him. Cole Matthews assaulted him, unprovoked, in front of everyone here. The confirmation hit social media like wildfire. Within minutes, Rodriguez's testimony was clipped, subtitled, and trending alongside the diner footage. For the Matthews family, reputation was crumbling in real time. Meanwhile, Cole's father, Richard Matthews, owner of half the county's land and the biggest bank in town, was on the phone in his mansion, 30 miles away. His voice thundered through the halls. "Get my lawyer. I don't care if it's midnight. I want him on this now. No son of mine rots in a cell because of some washed-up veteran and his government brat son." But even as he barked orders, his advisors whispered back, "Sir, this isn't going away. The Homeland Security angle, the cameras, it's gone national." For the first time in years, Richard Matthews felt power slipping from his grip. Back at the diner, Elias insisted on paying for his coffee, pressing quarters into Mariana's palm. She shook her head, eyes misty. "You don't owe me a thing. The world owes you." As the crowd slowly dispersed, Daniel and his agents prepared to escort Elias home. Before leaving, Daniel turned to Mariana. "Keep the footage safe. Don't let anyone scare you into deleting it." Her chin lifted with quiet determination. "Let them try." By midnight, the diner was empty again, its neon sign flickering against the quiet street. But Millbrook wasn't quiet anymore. Not online, not in the media, and not in the Matthews household. What had started as a slap in a small-town diner had become a spark threatening to burn down an empire. Elias sat in the back of Daniel's car, watching the lights of his town blur past. He touched the American flag pin on his cardigan, his voice low. "Didn't think it'd ever come to this." Daniel, eyes fixed on the road, replied, "It's only just beginning." And he was right. The true storm hadn't even started yet. The morning sun rose over Millbrook, but peace didn't come with it. For the first time in living memory, satellite trucks lined Main Street. Their giant antennas pointed toward the sky, reporters swarming like bees, microphones ready to sting. Murphy's Diner, usually filled with the smell of bacon and cheddar of farmers, had become ground zero for a national firestorm. Inside, Elias Johnson sat at his usual booth, cardigan neatly buttoned, American flag pin shining on his chest. But this wasn't an ordinary breakfast. This time, every eye in the room wasn't looking at the menu. They were looking at him. "Mr. Johnson, how does it feel to be called a hero?" A reporter shouted, flashing cameras in his face. Elias shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not a hero," he said softly, his voice steady. "I'm just a man who wanted coffee without being told I don't belong." But humility couldn't stop momentum. The nation had already decided. At 10 a.m., a black SUV rolled up. Out stepped Dr. Rebecca Allen, a civil rights attorney known for dismantling systemic discrimination cases. She carried herself with calm authority. flanked by two associates who immediately began collecting witness statements from anyone willing to talk. "Mr. Johnson," she said warmly, shaking Elias's hand, "your story is bigger than you. What happened here reflects a pattern we've seen across small towns in America. We're not just fighting for you. We're fighting for every person who's ever been told they don't belong." Elias met her eyes, tired but resolute. "Then let's make it count." In the corner, Mariana live-streamed everything on Instagram. Viewers flooded in 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, leaving a river of comments. "This man deserves justice. My grandpa served too. Stand strong, Mr. Johnson. The Matthews family's time is over." Cole's name trended worldwide, not for his wealth or influence, but for the violence he'd unleashed on a 71-year-old veteran. And then, the clip of Elias calmly dialing his son during the assault went viral on Twitter, TikTok, and news broadcasts. Commentators repeated one line again and again. He didn't just slap a veteran. He slapped the father of the Deputy Director of Homeland Security. By noon, the Millbrook Unity Coalition held a press conference on the courthouse steps. Standing shoulder to shoulder were Fire Chief Rodriguez, Reverend Harris from the local black church, Rabbi Levine from the synagogue, and Mrs. Patterson, a retired schoolteacher respected across generations. "This isn't just about one man's assault," Reverend Harris declared to the cameras. "This is about a system that has silenced voices for too long. Today that silence ends." Applause erupted from the gathered crowd. For the first time in years, Millbrook's marginalized voices felt seen, heard, and unafraid. Meanwhile, in his jail cell, Cole Matthews raged. He paced like a caged animal, shouting threats to the guards. "Do you know who my father is? Do you know what he owns?" But power had shifted. Outside, no one cared about his father's bank accounts or land deeds. The only thing people saw was the viral clip of him striking Elias. And every time he tried to protest, the echo of his own sneer, "Know your place, old man," was replayed across every news channel in America. Back at the diner, Elias sat quietly while chaos swirled around him. Daniel leaned over, lowering his voice. "Dad, things are moving fast. The Justice Department wants to review the case. Civil rights groups are organizing. And the Matthews family, they're scrambling." Elias stirred his coffee, the spoon clinking gently. Scrambling doesn't erase what they did. But maybe, just maybe, this time the truth won't be buried. Dr. Allen joined them, setting down a thick folder of documents. "Mr. Johnson, I need you to be prepared. What happened to you is the spark, but the investigation is going to uncover far more. The Matthews name is tied to decades of corruption, illegal contracts, voter intimidation, financial fraud. This assault could break the dam." Elias nodded slowly. "If my pain can stop others from being hurt, then I'll carry it." That evening, national news anchors repeated one phrase over and over: "Millbrook may be a small town, but tonight it sits at the center of America's conscience." Elias sat in his living room, his cardigan folded neatly beside him. He watched the coverage in silence, the glow of the television reflecting in his weary eyes. Outside, federal agents kept quiet watch over his home. Daniel stood behind him, hand on his father's shoulder. "It's not over, Dad. This is just the beginning." Elias's voice was steady, but heavy with truth. "I know, son. Storms don't end when the thunder fades. They end when the rebuilding begins." And with those words, the nation prepared for a battle that would stretch far beyond a diner in Millbrook. 3 nights after the diner incident, silence no longer felt safe. Elias Johnson stirred awake at 3 a.m., heart pounding as the sharp ring of the telephone cut through the darkness. He reached for the receiver with hands steadier than his age should allow. A whisper slid across the line. "Your boy can't protect you forever, old man. We know where you live." Click. The line went dead. Elias sat in the dim glow of the kitchen lamp, staring at the silent phone. For years, his life had been quiet morning walks, cups of coffee, the slow rhythm of small-town living. Now, shadows seemed to press against every window pane. By sunrise, the threats escalated. His mailbox lay twisted at the end of his driveway, shattered by a baseball bat. Garbage bags, ripped and scattered, littered the lawn. Across his garage door, in blood-red spray paint, the word screamed, "Traitor." Daniel arrived within the hour, federal agents at his side. His jaw tightened as he surveyed the vandalism. "This isn't random," Daniel muttered. "They're trying to scare you into silence." Elias brushed dirt from his cardigan, straightening with quiet dignity. "They've tried worse, son. If they think paint and phone calls will make me bow, they've forgotten who I am." Meanwhile, across town, Richard Matthews convened a meeting inside his sprawling mansion. The room smelled of cigars and desperation. Around the long oak table sat town council members, business partners, and loyalists who owed their wealth to the Matthews name. Richard's fist slammed the table. "We will not lose everything to some cardigan-wearing relic and his self-righteous son. Do you understand?" But cracks were showing. One councilman shifted nervously. "Sir, the feds are already digging. They've subpoenaed bank records." "If we push back too hard," Richard cut him off, voice icy. "Then we push harder. Remind them who controls this town." But fear had already taken root among his allies. For the first time, loyalty to the Matthews name didn't feel unshakable. Back at Elias's home, Dr. Rebecca Allen arrived with her legal team. She set thick folders of evidence across the dining table: financial ledgers, testimonies, decades of buried complaints. "Mr. Johnson," she said firmly, "this isn't just about your assault anymore. The Matthews machine is collapsing. But that means you've become their prime target. Every intimidation tactic in their arsenal, they'll use it." Elias poured her a cup of coffee, his hand steady. "Let them come. I've faced worse in jungles halfway across the world. I didn't flinch then, and I won't now." Rebecca studied him, both moved and worried. "Courage inspires people, but it also paints a bullseye. We need to keep you safe." That evening, Mariana posted another live stream update. This time, she didn't just cover the vandalism, she turned the camera on herself. "Millbrook needs to understand something," she told her growing audience of 20,000 viewers. "This isn't just about one man. This is about all of us who've been silenced, dismissed, or intimidated. They want us to be afraid. I say we stand with Mr. Johnson instead." Comments flooded the feed. "We're with you. Mr. Johnson, expose them all. Matthews' family days are numbered." The movement was no longer just Elias's burden. It was becoming a collective uprising, but the Matthews family wasn't finished. Late that night, a black truck idled across the street from Elias's house. Two men inside watched the front door, passing a flask between them. "You think the old man scares easy?" One muttered. The other smirked. Everyone cracks eventually. But when a federal SUV pulled into the driveway, its headlights flooding the truck, the men sped off into the night. Daniel stepped out, hand resting on his holstered sidearm, scanning the dark. His voice was calm but edged with steel. "They're testing us. Next time, it won't just be threats." Elias stood on the porch, cardigan pulled tight against the chill, eyes unwavering. "Then let them test. I've been tested my whole life." By the end of the week, the situation had spiraled beyond Millbrook. Similar intimidation tactics were reported in towns across the state: elderly veterans harassed, minority-owned businesses vandalized, witnesses receiving anonymous calls in the dead of night. The Department of Justice launched parallel investigations in 12 counties. What started with a slap in a diner was unraveling into something far bigger, a coordinated system of fear and exclusion stretching back decades. And at the center of it all, Elias Johnson stood as the unwilling symbol of resistance, an old man in a cardigan who refused to break. That night, as Elias prepared for bed, he caught his reflection in the mirror. The bruise on his cheek had faded, but the weight in his eyes hadn't. He touched the silver star medal resting in its case on the dresser. "Some fights," he whispered to himself, "don't end when the war does." And in the silence that followed, he knew the Matthews family hadn't just declared war on him. They had declared war on the truth. The Matthews estate, once the shining crown of Millbrook, now stood like a fortress under siege. Reporters camped at its gates, camera flashes bouncing off the iron fences. For decades, the Matthews family dictated every story told in town. But now, the story was writing itself, and it painted them as villains. Inside, Richard Matthews paced the marble floor, tie loosened, sweat on his brow. For the first time, his control slipped. Every newspaper, every station, he snarled, slamming a tablet on the table where headlines screamed Matthews Empire under federal investigation. Do they think they can drag my family name through the mud? His son, David, leaned back in his chair, smirking. Maybe they're just finally telling the truth, Father. You built this empire on intimidation and bribes. Did you think it would last forever? Richard's face darkened, but beneath the anger was something rarer fear. At the federal headquarters in D.C. Daniel stood before a digital map glowing with red pins, each marking towns where intimidation, financial corruption, and racial discrimination had ties leading back to Matthews' own subsidiaries. This isn't just one family's corruption, Daniel told the task force. It's an infrastructure of fear. Housing, policing, even education. Matthews' money was the glue holding it all together. A young analyst pointed to fresh data. We traced shell companies to contracts in 4 states. Kickbacks, fraudulent billing, intimidation of minority contractors. It's bigger than we thought. Daniel nodded grimly. Then we hit harder. We bring down the whole machine, not just one gear. Back in Millbrook, Elias felt the weight of the storm gathering. Federal agents had set up a protective detail around his home, but his daily walks now drew whispers and stares. Some neighbors avoided him entirely. Others slipped quiet notes of gratitude into his mailbox. One morning, a woman Elias barely knew stopped him on the street. Her hands trembled as she pressed an envelope into his palm. My husband, he worked construction for the Matthews Group, she whispered. He was forced to sign false invoices. If he refused, they threatened to fire him. Maybe this can help. Inside the envelope were copies of pay stubs, invoices, and threatening letters, evidence that expanded the investigation even further. Elias thanked her softly. You're braver than you think. Courage doesn't always roar, it sometimes whispers. Meanwhile, Mariana's live streams had gone viral beyond her imagination. Her latest broadcast, titled The Town That Feared Its Own Shadows, hit 1 million views in under 24 hours. She didn't just tell Elias's story anymore, she highlighted systemic injustice across the region. Millbrook is not alone, she declared. How many towns are controlled by families like the Matthews? How many voices silenced? How many businesses crushed? How many lives dictated by fear of retaliation? Her audience responded with stories of their own. From Georgia to Illinois, people messaged her with similar tales of intimidation. It was no longer just a town scandal, it was a national reckoning. Richard Matthews could feel control slipping like sand through his fingers. His empire had been built on the illusion of invincibility. But illusions break when too many people stop believing. At a secret meeting in his private office, Richard barked orders at his remaining loyalists. Fight back. Call the press, flood social media, smear that old man's name if you have to. But the room fell silent. One by one, former allies avoided his gaze. Finally, a council member spoke. Richard, this isn't just politics anymore. The Justice Department has your files. If we go down with you, we lose everything. Maybe it's time we cut ties. The words landed like a knife. For the first time in his career, Richard Matthews stood alone. As federal indictments began rolling in, the Matthews fortune withered. Properties were seized, accounts frozen, contracts canceled. The once feared Matthews name now sparked derision, but Elias remained calm through it all. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of gold and crimson, he sat on his porch with Daniel. The air smelled of rain, the world quiet after weeks of noise. You ever wonder, Daniel asked, why you didn't just stay quiet? Let someone else fight this fight? Elias's gaze lingered on the horizon. Because silence is the ally of injustice, son. Every time we look away, every time we bite our tongue, we let men like Richard believe they're untouchable. I couldn't live with that weight on my conscience. Daniel nodded, pride flickering in his eyes. Then let's finish what we started. That same night, Mariana uploaded her most powerful video yet. Over dramatic footage of courtrooms, protests, and Elias's steadfast presence, her voice rang out. This isn't just about one old man in a cardigan. This is about a system finally being dragged into the light. The Matthews empire is crumbling, but the bigger question remains, what will rise from its ashes? The video ended with Elias's quiet words from a recent interview. Some fights don't end when the war does. They just wait for you to pick them back up. Millions shared the clip. Overnight, Elias became more than a victim, he became a symbol of resistance. By week's end, subpoenas turned into arrests. Richard Matthews himself received notice to appear before a federal grand jury. The empire was cracking, its foundations rotting away for all the world to see. But as Elias lay in bed that night, the house quiet around him, he knew one truth with chilling clarity. When powerful men are cornered, they don't surrender quietly. The storm wasn't over. It was about to strike back harder than ever. The Matthews mansion sat in silence, its windows dark, its iron gates locked. But inside, Richard Matthews hadn't given up. Losing money was one thing. Losing power, that was unforgivable. He sat at the head of the long oak table, a glass of bourbon untouched before him. Around him, a handful of loyalists, the last remnants of his empire, shifted nervously in their seats. Richard's voice was low, but his words cut like a blade. They think they've won. They think Elias Washington is some kind of hero. But heroes bleed like any other man. And when he falls, so does this so-called movement. A younger loyalist swallowed hard. Sir, the feds, they're everywhere. Cameras, agents, even drones over your property. If we make one wrong move, Richard's fist slammed down, rattling the glasses. Then we move smarter. No paper trails. No hired thugs from out of town. We use what Millbrook has always had: fear. The room fell silent. Fear. The weapon that built the Matthews empire. The weapon Richard knew best. That night, Elias returned from a community meeting to find his porch light smashed. A spray-painted word glared back at him from his garage. Traitor. Daniel, walking beside him, tensed instantly. They're escalating. Elias's eyes scanned the shadows. The quiet street suddenly felt alive with unseen watchers. They want to scare me back into silence, he murmured. But we've already come too far. Daniel dialed his phone. We'll increase surveillance. No one comes near you without clearance. But even as he spoke, Elias could feel it, the pressure mounting, the storm circling closer. Meanwhile, Mariana sat in her small studio, editing her latest video. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Unknown number, new message. She frowned, clicked it open. A grainy photo filled the screen. It showed Elias at his mailbox that morning. Across the image were the words, "You're next if you don't shut him up." Her blood ran cold. She grabbed her phone, calling Daniel immediately. They're watching him, Daniel. Right now. Up close. Daniel's jaw tightened on the other end. Send it to me. We'll trace it. But Mariana already knew this wasn't just surveillance. This was a message. And it meant the Matthews weren't finished. At the diner where it all began, Maria Santos cleaned tables in silence. The place hadn't been the same since the assault. Every corner seemed heavy with memory. As she reached for a plate, a folded piece of paper slipped out from under it. Curious, she opened it. Scrawled words leapt off the page. Tell your old man friend to back down, or the fire next time won't be in a courtroom. Maria's hand shook. She looked around the diner, but the booths were empty, the morning crowd gone. Whoever left it had vanished. She clutched the note tight and whispered, God help us. The following evening, Elias was invited to speak at the town's Interfaith Coalition gathering. Hundreds filled the hall: farmers, teachers, church members, even children clutching handmade signs that read justice for all. Elias walked slowly to the podium. Cardigan neat, American flag pin gleaming under the lights. Applause thundered through the room, but he raised a hand for silence. My friends, he began, voice steady but firm. We are not fighting one man or one family. We are fighting a sickness fear. For years it kept our town in chains. Fear of speaking. Fear of losing jobs. Fear of losing homes. But look around you tonight. Fear is losing its grip. The crowd roared, hope rippling like fire through dry grass. But in the back of the hall, a man in a dark jacket slipped away early. He pulled out his phone, typing a single text to Richard Matthews. He's emboldening them. We need to act now. Hours later, as Elias returned home, a low rumble echoed through the quiet street. He paused at his front gate, ears straining. Then headlights cut through the darkness too fast, too close. "Dad, move!" Daniel shouted, grabbing Elias's arm just as a black SUV swerved toward them. Tires screeched, gravel flew, and the vehicle missed Elias by inches before speeding into the night. Neighbors rushed out, some filming on their phones, others shouting for help. Daniel held Elias's shoulders, fury in his eyes. This isn't intimidation anymore. This is attempted murder. Elias straightened slowly, brushing dust from his cardigan. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. They want me to run. They want me to hide. But as long as I can stand, I will not bend to them. Daniel looked at him, torn between admiration and fear. Then we fight back with everything we have. The next morning, Mariana uploaded the footage of the SUV attack, her voice breaking as she narrated. They tried to silence Elias Washington last night. But instead of silencing him, they've revealed exactly who they are, cowards hiding behind violence. The world is watching, and the Matthews can't hide forever. Within hours, the video climbed to the top of trending charts. Thousands flooded the comments. Protect Elias. Justice now. End the Matthews reign. But in the Matthews mansion, Richard watched the video with cold eyes. They want war? He whispered. Then they'll get it. The Matthews mansion no longer buzzed with the confidence of old wealth. Instead, it pulsed with desperation. Richard Matthews stood by the window, the glow of a dying fire behind him, his glass untouched. Outside, the world had turned against him, federal agents, journalists, protesters, but inside, he clung to the one weapon he still commanded, violence. They won't listen to reason. They won't bow to intimidation. So we burn the foundation they're standing on, Richard hissed to his remaining allies. A burly man at the table shifted uneasily. Sir, you're talking about terrorism. That'll end everything. Richard's smile was cold. It already is the end. And if I'm going down, I'm taking Elias Washington with me. He slid a blueprint across the table. It was the layout of the Unity Coalition Community Center, the very place where Elias and hundreds of townspeople gathered each week. Red X's marked exits. Timelines scrawled in black ink. Silence swallowed the room. For years, the Matthews family had ruled through fear, whispers, and economic control. But this was different. This was war. The next evening, Elias sat in his modest living room with Daniel and Mariana. On the coffee table lay stacks of petitions, video testimonials, and letters from across the country. Support was pouring in, but so were the threats. Daniel leaned forward. Dad, you need to consider relocation. Even just for a while. They nearly killed you with that SUV. They're not going to stop. Elias shook his head. If I leave, it tells them they've won. If I run, the people lose hope. I'd rather face their fire standing tall than live my days in hiding. Mariana's phone buzzed. She checked the screen and her face drained of color. You both need to see this. She turned the phone toward them. An anonymous video played grainy security footage of the community center. A distorted voice spoke over it. Tomorrow night, the coalition gathers. Tomorrow night, fire cleanses Millbrook. Daniel shot to his feet. This is a direct threat. Homeland Security needs to lock this place down now. Elias closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with a calm resolve. Then tomorrow night, we gather anyway. But we gather ready. News spread fast. By morning, rumors of a planned attack ran through Millbrook like wildfire. Some families stayed home, afraid. But others, teachers, farmers, factory workers came to Elias's door. Volunteering to help. Maria from the diner stood among them, her apron still on. You stood for us when they called you garbage. We're standing for you now. Reverend Johnson brought his congregation. Rabbi Miller arrived with interfaith leaders. Even Fire Chief Rodriguez stood ready, his badge gleaming. The coalition wasn't just a meeting anymore. It had become a fortress of unity. That night, floodlights blazed around the community center. Federal agents mixed with local volunteers, scanning rooftops, alleys, and parked cars. Inside, the hall filled with voices singing old hymns and freedom songs, courage drowning out fear. Elias stood at the podium, Daniel beside him, Maria and Mariana recording every moment. The flag pin on his cardigan caught the light as he began to speak. They tried to silence us with fists. They tried with threats. They tried with fear. But fear only wins when good people stay silent. Tonight, in this room, we are louder than fear. Cheers erupted, shaking the walls. But outside, shadows moved. Richard's men parked 2 vans a block away. Inside, they unpacked crude incendiary devices, Molotov cocktails, homemade explosives. One of the men hesitated. This is madness, Richard. There are children in there. Richard's eyes blazed. Collateral. They'll remember my name. Do it. But as the men stepped out of the van, floodlights snapped on. Red dots danced across their chests. A voice boomed from loudspeakers. Drop the weapons. Federal agents. You're surrounded. Panic erupted. One man dropped his device, the bottle shattering, flames licking across the pavement. Another bolted, only to be tackled by armored agents. Richard stayed frozen in the van, eyes wide as the trap closed in. He had been OUTPLAYED. Inside the center, Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the text, then leaned close to Elias. They're outside. Homeland's got them pinned down. Elias allowed himself a faint smile. The Matthews built their empire on fear. Tonight, fear burns itself. But even as cheers filled the hall, Daniel caught something troubling. The agents' messages weren't all clear. Not every suspect was accounted for. Somewhere in the night, one of Richard's loyalists had slipped through. The battle wasn't over. It was just shifting into the shadows. The night air of Millbrook was thick with smoke and sirens. Outside the Unity Coalition Center, federal agents hauled Richard Matthews' men into armored vans. The media swarmed the scene, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. But inside the hall, the people of Millbrook held their breath. They knew the fight wasn't finished. Daniel paced near the exit, his earpiece crackling with updates. We've got most of them. But at least one slipped away. Stay alert. Elias remained at the podium, calm as stone. His voice carried through the hushed room. They tried to end us tonight. They came with fire, but they forgot something important. Fire doesn't just destroy. Fire can forge. Tonight, we are forged together stronger than we've ever been. Applause rose like thunder. But Daniel's eyes stayed sharp, scanning the shadows. Behind the center, a lone figure crept through the service door. A hood covered his face. In his hands was a small black duffel bag. Inside, wires and fuel sloshed together, a last desperate weapon. He slipped down the corridor, footsteps echoing against tile. His target was the main hall, packed with hundreds of innocent lives. But he wasn't alone. Maria Santos had gone to refill the coffee urns when she saw him. Her tray clattered to the floor, eyes widening. Stop! She shouted. The man lunged at her, shoving her aside. The bag slipped, thudding against the floor. A red light blinked on its side. Daniel's voice thundered across the hall. Evacuate now! Everyone out! Panic surged. Chairs scraped, children cried, volunteers guided people toward the exits. Elias stayed firm at the podium, refusing to move until the last soul was out. Daniel sprinted down the corridor, gun drawn, heart pounding. He found Maria bruised but alive, pointing to the service door. He went that way. He's got something. Daniel turned the corner and froze. The bomber was there, fumbling with wires, seconds away from detonation. Drop it! Daniel roared. The man sneered. If I die, he dies too, Matthews promised. Before he could finish, a voice cut through the chaos, calm, unshaken. Son. The bomber turned. At the other end of the hall stood Elias Washington, cardigan dusted, flag pin gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. You don't have to do this, Elias said softly. I've seen fear twist good men into monsters. But you still have a choice. Right here. Right now. For a heartbeat, the bomber hesitated. His hand trembled on the trigger. The blinking red light reflected in his eyes. Behind him, Daniel moved closer. Inch by inch. You don't understand, the man spat. Matthews owns me. If I fail, Elias stepped forward. Matthews owns nothing. Not your hands. Not your heart. You are more than his pawn. You are free the moment you choose to be. Silence stretched. The crowd outside had gone quiet, listening through the open doors. Cameras rolled, catching every word. Finally, the bomber's knees buckled. Tears welled in his eyes. With a strangled cry, he dropped the bag. Daniel lunged, kicking it aside as agents swarmed in, neutralizing the device in seconds. The hall erupted in cheers and sobs. People hugged, wept, and sang. For the first time in decades, Millbrook felt alive with hope. Elias stood at the podium once more, voice thick with emotion. Tonight wasn't about me. It wasn't about Richard Matthews. It was about us. Every one of us who refuses to bow to fear. They called me garbage. They tried to silence me. But we are here. And we are unbroken. Maria raised her phone, streaming live. Her voice trembled as she spoke. The world is watching. And what they're seeing is proof that dignity doesn't break. It bends, it bleeds, but it never breaks. 2 weeks later, federal charges dismantled the Matthews empire. Richard himself sat in a high-security cell, stripped of power. His name now synonymous with disgrace. The Unity Coalition grew stronger, spreading beyond Millbrook into neighboring towns. Investigations launched in state after state, exposing networks of fear and control. And Elias? On a warm Sunday morning, he sat outside the diner where it all began, sipping coffee with Maria, Daniel, and Mariana. Children ran across the street, chasing each other with laughter. A stranger approached, young, nervous, holding a notebook. Mr. Washington, I just wanted to say, thank you. You showed me I don't have to stay silent anymore. Elias smiled gently, tapping his flag pin. Son, dignity isn't something you wait for. It's something you choose. Every day. The boy nodded, tears in his eyes before walking away. Elias leaned back, watching the sun rise over Millbrook. For the first time in years, the town felt lighter. Fear was gone, and dignity, his dignity, remained.